What's up, guys? In this video I am going to show you the full walkthrough of adding equipment to Metasys MUI. Currently we already have a space set up for the equipment that we are going to add. However, there is no equipment added to this space, and one of the reasons is we still need to go in and create our equipment definition, and we need to get everything set up for this particular device. Now, what we're going to be adding is a hot and chilled water system. We're going to break it out between the hot water and the chilled water system, even though this is on the same controller. That is something that we typically like to do to keep the systems separate, and it makes going through everything a little bit easier when you're trying to do troubleshooting, when you are trying to set up for the triage, the equipment triage, the fault triage and things like that. If you do not set it up properly, the fault triage and things will not work properly. So that's what we're going to do. Now, the way that we will begin this, of course, is we're going to look at the drawings that we have here for our system, and this is of course them, and we're going to begin in SCT. This is where we do all of our work within MUI, is within SCT. Now, the first thing that I recommend you do is, of course, a backup on your server. Okay, anything that you do, if you do not back it up before you make any changes, you risk losing it. So make sure that you do a backup. And what we need to add to our server underneath the equipment definitions folder is an equipment definition for the equipment that we're going to be using. Now, you see we do not even have a folder listed for this. So what we can do is simply highlight the equipment definitions folder. I'm going to go up to Facility, Prepare Rapid Archive, and then I'm going to insert equipment definition. Once I have that selected, it's going to take just a minute, and it will give us a pop-up window. Okay, here is our pop-up window, and we want to add a folder. So we will name that folder for this particular equipment that we're going to create. Now, once I press the new folder, it automatically creates it and adds it to the tree for me, and now I can create an equipment definition. So to begin, what we're going to create is the chilled water system. Press next. This is why you want to make sure that you break it out. What I need to select here is central cooling plants. Even though this is connected to a central plant and really the only thing that we have is a valve, we do want to make sure that we separate it in order for the triage and things like that to work properly. So now that we have that selected, I'm going to press next. This is just a review screen, and I'm going to hit finish. Now it has created the folder and the equipment definition, but you don't see it displayed over here. The reason for that, I need to go up and do a refresh all tabs, drop this down, equipment definition, and now you should see it displaying, and here it is. Okay, so I'm going to double click into the equipment definition, and this is where I set up my search criteria. Okay, this is where you're basically going to be pulling your points in from the controller. What I'm going to do is go down to the building, and once I get to the building, I'm going to drop down the equipment. Of course, this is labeled just as DX1. That is not what it's going to appear as, because we are going to make an adjustment when we get this completed. Now, some of the points that I want to grab, first of all, is the chilled water system enable. I can grab this entire controller and pull it over here, and it will literally grab all of the points in there for me. But I want to pull this out to where I have just the points that I need. Okay, since this is a chilled water system, those are the only points that I want to pull into here. Okay, so of course the system enable is going to be coming in. My return temperature is going to come in, and notice again it is labeled as hot chilled water temperature because this is a 2-pipe system. I can break it out to a single equipment definition and put everything in one, but I just do not like doing it that way. I like to keep things separate. Okay, our summer winter command, I think that this is something to have, very useful. And of course I can rearrange the order that I put these in. Okay, let's put our summer winter command up top. We have our hot water, chill water supply temperature or return temperature, and we just keep going. I can see my BTU, my flow rate. I can see my valve, my set point, my flow, the minimum flow set point, and these are pretty much the majority of what I'm going to want to pull in. And again, I can reorder these however I want. Okay, now that we have the let's also grab our supply temperature. Okay, we do see the supply temperature there, and I'm going to reorder it. So I'm going to click this and pull it up. Of course, this is labeled as heat exchanger, hot water supply temperature, but again, this is a 2-pipe system, so we will see the temperatures, you know, for both within the system. Okay, we will see it when it's hot, we will see it when it's cold. So that's something that you can make a note of. Now, you saw me reordering it here. That's just something that I like to do. When I add points here, just by checking the box next to them, it will appear here as I check them. This is where it is going to display, or I should say this is how it will display within your system. I just have defaulted to putting them in order up here just to make things a little bit neater. And you know, that way if I go back to make any kind of changes or anything, I can find it a little bit faster. Okay, now that I have these set, all the points that I need pulled in, what I need to do now is simply hit save. That's all that I need to do. Okay, press save, and now I'm going to hit open in Discovery. This is where, if you had multiple systems and things like that, you would bring those controllers in to where it would create the equipment definitions or the equipment objects for them. Now, do you see the name here? It's still showing as DX1. I'm going to change that here. Okay. And I can add a description, and of course I'm typing it out a little bit longer than what some people would. If this was serving some other piece of equipment that was in our system, I would add that here just by dropping and dragging that equipment object into this area here. Then that's something you need to take note of. You know, inside here, this is where all of your equipment objects are. You know, and if I was using something else within the building, you know, that's what I would need to attach it to. That way, if you don't do that, your default triage will not work because it doesn't know what equipment that it is seeing. Okay, once I have gotten to this point, the only thing that I need to do is press save, And of course it's telling me I've not mapped any serving relationships for this equipment. Do I want to continue? Yes. Okay. It'll take it just a moment. Successfully created one equipment object. Now the way that we find that, if you'll notice, we don't have anything underneath the equipment tab yet. I go back up to the top, right click, refresh all tabs, select equipment, and now I have a green arrow. That's an indication that something has changed. Here is my folder. Here is my trunk. Here is that equipment object that we've created. Now what I need to do is add this to a space. I'm going to select spaces. Here I'm just going to double click. That's going to open my edit pane. I'm going to go back to my equipment tab because that's where I'm going to need to pull the equipment object from, or it just makes it a little easier. Now I'm going to select edit. I'm going to drop down the tree, and adding spaces is done within this tree. Okay. If, for example, in PFT, of course I already have an equipment space set up, but what I could do if I wanted to, I could set up another space, a new folder. Okay, if I click that, you can see there it basically replicates the type of space that I had created previously, but I don't need that. Okay, so let's get rid of it. This tree that you'll notice, I want you to pay attention to this. This tree is what you will see on the left-hand side of your screen here. Okay, this looks familiar. All of this is created here. It is ordered here. That's where we build our spaces. Okay. Since we already have this highlighted, I can change the authorization category. I can change the type to whether it is a building, floor, generic, or whatever. Okay, for this, I'm going to select generic. I'm going to leave it at generic, and that's just going to fall into how I want it to appear. I can select a graphic served by. This is what we need to pay close attention to. You'd heard me mention earlier about drag and drop. I'm simply going to highlight the equipment object. I'm going to drop it into the equipment folder, and you see that it popped in here. I can go into this section here and add equipment this way, but I just prefer doing the drag and drop method. It seems to work fine. Okay. Once I do that, I can simply hit save. Now we need to go back in to our equipment definitions, and we need to create one for our hot water system. So I'm going to scroll back down to my folder. I'm going to highlight the PFT folder because that's where I want to put it. Facility, prepare rapid archive, insert equipment definition. Again, it takes it a minute. A lot of that's going to depend on your server speed. This time I don't need to add a folder, so I'm just going to click next. And we will call this hot water. I'm going to hit next. From here, subsystem type, central heating. If I had a graphic, I could add it here, but we don't have a graphic yet, so that's something we'll be building later. Hit next. It's the review screen, and I hit finish. As we can see here, here is our hot water equipment definition, so I'm going to double click it. I'm going to scroll down to where the equipment is. And of course this is on that same DX. This is an old DX 9100. For this, basically the same process. I'm going to grab my summer winter command. That way it will be viewable on both systems. My hot water system enable. I am going to grab my hot water set point. I'm going to grab there's my return temperature again, as well as any other points that I want. My heat exchanger valve 1 and 2, let's grab them. Let's grab our pumps, our supply temp, and again reorder it. Okay. Now I can click here and uncheck this, that way it clears everything off, and then when I click it again it will match the order that I have arranged up top. We can see our type and as well as a lot of the other information that we have here. You can edit your search criteria over on this side here. If you have devices that are similar except for just a few minor things, you can go in and add those wildcards to where it will pull from other controllers. Now press save. Open in Discovery. It's giving me this name again, but we're going to change that. And we'll go ahead and add it as a description too. I'm going to press save. Same warning, but you know, we're going to proceed. We're going to save this. Okay, it has created the equipment object. And remember, we need to go up and do a refresh all. I'm going to pull up my Spaces tab, and I'm going to bring up my edit pane for the spaces. Now, just to show you, when I drill down to PFT for the equipment, I'm going to press this and I'm going to select add, just to show you that you can add this way. I need to click on my equipment tab here, drill down, here's the hot water equipment object that we created. So highlight that, press OK. Press OK again, and then press save. And now we have created our equipment objects, and we have added the equipment to the spaces where we need them. The next step in this process is going to be to synchronize the server or do a download. That's going to really depend on your system and what you need to do. So we will do that, and then we will come back to show you the equipment populated within MUI. Now that we have done the download on our server or synchronization, just depending on what you are doing on your system, we now have our equipment appearing in our summary. You can see here we have the hot water system. If I drop this down here, you can see that we have our chilled water system, and of course we have all our points as well. Once I click into the device, you can see here that we have all of our points. You can tell that we are in winter mode. System enabled is on. We have our temperatures as well as what our heat exchanger is doing and that sort of thing. Now what we can do from here is we can begin to start setting up our dashboards as well as our graphics. Now if I was to click on my equipment page, what I currently have here, this is all blank, and the reason for that is we do not have a graphic set up for this page the way that we do in a lot of other places. Typically the way we will set something up is we will set up a summary screen for our equipment. For example, if I click into another building and click onto the equipment page there, I have a summary of the core building equipment for the building. And the reason we do that, from this one page we can see what's going on with the core systems. Obviously if we don't have an air handler running, or if we don't have hot water or chilled water in a building, depending on the time of year, we will obviously have a problem. Okay, and from here I have links to where I can go into the various systems, simply clicking onto the graphic of the hot water system, and it takes me directly into the hot water system. From here I have an additional points and things like that from what I did previously. You know, the summary screen is good. It can give you a lot of basic information, but when you want to go down to the finer things, if you need to do some troubleshooting or some adjustments or things like that, that's where you would go further into the equipment page. Now with our equipment page here, we do not have all of that set up as of yet. However, that is part of the process. Each equipment page is going to be a little bit different. It's going to be up to you how you set your system up. This seems to be what works for us. The first thing that I'd like to do in our systems like this, when we bring a system online, when we get it into MUI, I typically will go ahead and build the equipment page after I get the graphics set up for that device. Okay, currently we do not have any graphics. This is just as it is, out of the box, bare bones. There is no graphics whatsoever. The way that we change that is go up to our tools, this little skinny snowman as it is commonly called. We're going to go to feature management, and we're going to select graphics manager. Inside the graphics manager, of course, it has it highlighted for this particular piece of equipment. Now one thing you'll want to take note of, if you are doing graphics in a building that has a lot of VAVs, if you tie the graphic to the equipment definition and not just the individual pieces of equipment, it will automatically populate all of the information and all of those VAVs for you. Just to give you a little bit better understanding of that, for example, if we were to look at one of the VAVs for this particular floor, you can see here we do have a dual duct VAV graphic, and it is aliased. The reason that it is aliased is because this graphic was built on an equipment definition. Instead of having to build an individual graphic for all of these VAVs, what you can do is build an equipment definition just for or a graphic just for the equipment definition, and that way it will populate all of the devices that are linked to that equipment definition. Okay, just to give you a quick overview of how this looks when you're looking at the points. If I go in to edit this, and I'm just going to show you something quick with this just to give you guys a little bit more information. When I go in to edit this, when I press the link button, you can see that it comes up here with this tab as far as alias. And what it gives me here are all of the points that are attached to this particular equipment definition. From here, I can build my graphic. I also can link it to an explicit device. an explicit point or whatever. However, again, if I'm doing a building full of VAVs, I don't want to do multiple VAVs, multiple graphics. So by letting it do it through the alias, then it does a lot of the work for me. So we're going to exit out of this, and we're going to go back to our equipment that we just built. When I scroll down to the equipment definitions here, I can add the graphic to the particular equipment definition. You know, once I scroll down to find those, of course they're down at the bottom of the page, so just bear with me. And here are my chill water and my hot water system. When I click that, there is no graphic there. I can build it either here, or I can build it underneath the equipment and spaces tree and tie it just to that particular device. That's going to be completely up to you. You know, that's just the way that you do your system. It's up to you. Typically, in a lot of cases, I will go ahead and bind this to a particular equipment definition. That's just the way that I've kind of the workflow that I've developed. But there are times when that is unacceptable, and I will put it directly onto the piece of equipment itself. You know, of course, you can do it either way. When you have a system like this, where there's only just one type of system, just a single hot water system, you know, you can put it directly onto the equipment. But there again, it's just completely up to you. Okay? But while we are here, we will go ahead and begin the process of building our graphics, and that way we can go over some of the tools within the graphics. I'm going to highlight the equipment definition. I'm going to press the add graphic, and I'm going to name this. Okay? From here, you can set authorization categories. If I wanted to set a particular, only let certain people in, that's where I can do that. And you can go back and edit that at a future date. From here, underneath these tabs, what you have are a lot of pre-built graphics. If you're building an air handler, you have all of these options here. If you are wanting to start something completely from scratch, that's what you would select here. And you can click through here, and it'll give you a preview of what those graphics will appear to be. And of course, you can modify them. Okay? I've got various miscellaneous and things like that. And then of course, this is what we're after. Underneath water, if you're doing a chilled water system, if you're doing a hot water system, depending on the type of hot water system that you're doing, of course a hot water system is what we're after. We have a shell and tube heat exchanger, and that's what we have here. Okay? If I had just a regular plate frame heat exchanger, you can see that gives me that option here. I'm going to select the one that we have in our system, and I'm going to hit create. It's going to take it just a minute, and it will create the baseline graphic for our system. And what it's also going to do is it's going to go out and try to pull a lot of the points that it thinks that we will need for us. Of course, we do not see it here. I like to hit the save button at this point, and that way once it has created it and we save it, we can actually open another window and view the point itself, view this equipment. So let's close this here. Now when we click our other tab, I want you to notice something. A lot of the graphics do not appear. You can see here is our heat exchanger from the graphics page, the graphics editor. But when I click into the graphic itself, when I'm going to view it, there's nothing there. The reason for that is this has not been bound. These points have not been bound to a particular object. Some of the naming in the way that was done with the N2 systems does not necessarily get captured with the way that the graphics try to look for things. You know, they look at the name. Basically, if you were to build this out of CCT, that CAD file will populate a lot of the objects within this graphic. Unfortunately, since this is an old N2 DX9100 with the naming and everything a little bit different, then it does not do that for us automatically. But we can still get this resolved. It's still something that we can work with. Okay, for example, this is our temperatures. You can see the naming convention of that. It does not match what we have. Our leaving temperature, of course, is going to be our hot water supply. What we can do, I'm going to highlight this object, and when you build these, it basically makes this whole thing as one object. We've got this window here to where we can change that. We want to ungroup the objects within this. Once I ungroup it, I can now click on the individual block, the individual object here. I'm going to highlight that. This little button here is my link button. When I press my link button, it's going to give me all of the points within the equipment definition, just like I mentioned earlier. Since this is going to be our supply temperature, that is what I'm going to go for. Right here, hot water supply return temp. Of course, the naming of this is a little different, but I'm going to drag that and I'm going to drop it. And if something that, I don't know why the screens do that within MUI, but occasionally this box will jump around. Okay, I now have this tied to this. This is my temperature, and just to show you, currently I'm still not seeing anything here. But when I press save and then I refresh my other screen, once it saves, you will notice in a moment that we will begin displaying the temperature. Here is our temperature being displayed, and we're just going to keep doing that. We're going to keep linking our objects to the values that they're going to be representing. Okay, so we go back to our editor and we just continue. Our heat exchanger valves, I'm going to highlight one of them, press my link. It's going to bring me my pop-up. Heat exchanger valve 1. Okay. Heat exchanger valve 2. Now, one thing that I'll do on a heat exchanger, just to show that it is working, a lot of times I will link the heat exchanger status to the 1/3 valve. That way, if that valve opens, then we get that animation. You can link it to the system enable or just whatever you would like to do. Your summer winter changeover or just whatever. That's completely up to you. Okay. Going to hit save. But now that we have those pump commands tied in, we can go back and refresh and see a bit more information. Okay guys, this is just some of the basic steps in getting your system up and running and begin building it out in MUI. You know, if this is something that is useful to you, be sure to give the video a thumbs up. Be sure to leave me a comment down below. And guys, don't let this system be reflective of typically what you would see out there in the world. Like I say, this is an older system that is going to be renovated, and that's something that I may do another video on in the near future, is how you can go in and edit and make changes and things like that. But guys, for now, thanks for watching. Check out all the links down in the description below. Leave me a comment down below, and we'll see you next time.